I still want to encourage people to really remember the things that make us good trainers, and to ensure that our training, even if it's now delivered in a different way or facilitated in a different way, is still engaging, interesting, effective, and where you leave your trainees wanting to come back for more. I think one of the key considerations is us, the trainer, and also the learning environment. And just because we're not face to face, it doesn't mean that we still can't be as effective or as good or as successful as we were when we were in the room with our trainees. So I think you've got to think about, what are the key qualities and traits of good trainers? What do I already possess? And now that we've got a little bit more time, what can I develop? So, for example, empathy's really important, and maybe that's something I could work on. Maybe it's looking at different ways to be engaging. Maybe it's discovering new topics. So there are a whole range of key qualities and traits, and in my the trainer course I cover these. The other thing is the learning environment, and if we're lucky enough, and actually now that we are in charge of our own training room effectively, how do we make it a really interesting and engaging environment? Not just from a physical point of view, but also from a psychological point of view. So again, that's a topic I cover in some detail in my course. If you, like me, train two different types of trainees, insofar as I do a lot of in-house work, so I work with individual clients and they've got a group of people from the same organisation. And I also do open courses, so different people from different organisations. And they come with different sort of expectations and needs. Generally in-house, maybe one person has determined what the training need is, whereas when you opt to go to an open course, generally you've identified the training need. So I think it's finding out what the training needs are, if you can. Secondly, we need to give some consideration to learning styles. Now, here's a challenging one, having moved out of the training room into a virtual training room, because not everybody, if you're doing your face-to-face, is going to want the camera on them. So some people might want to take part in your training session, but they want to keep the camera off. So we're assuming that they are very strong with their auditory listening skills. But as most of us know, the majority of people, we're either kinesthetic, we have to do something to learn it, or we're visual. So how do we understand what the best way that our learners, their style of learning? And one of the things that I cover in my course is a survey a very simple survey that we can send to our delegates to get a good idea of what the mix is. But if you don't do that, just make an assumption that most people aren't auditory, or that's not their strength, that we're more visual and hands-on. And then also, what's motivating people, or what would motivate people to come to your virtual training room or to buy your online training package? So what are the things that motivate people to learn? And then probably, maybe more importantly, especially for those of you that are training adults, what are the key characteristics of adult learners? Because they are different to the characteristics of adolescents and children, although I think that we can engage children in a more non-didactic way. But being didactic is not a good way to train adults. So understanding, based on Malcolm Knowles' work many, many years ago, what are the key characteristics of adult learners? One of the kind of barriers that I find with a lot of people who have come to my open course or I've trained in-house is actually challenging ourselves to think about new and different ways of training people, the kinds of activities. And I always ask people, how confident are you running a role play? And of course, most people go, oh, no, no way. And I think the pity about something like role play is it's a great technique for doing something as if it was real life, but in a safe environment. But it's generally not well done. So I think it's what are all the different activities that we can use? Case study, mind map, consensus exercise. There's lots of different activities. And I think what we've got to do as trainers is what are the pros, what are the cons, and how long does it take to set up? So I often use debate, which is a great way to engage people. It allows everyone to have a voice. It controls the people that like to take over, but it takes some time to set up. So, analysing the pros and cons of activities. Then, of course, training aids. Some of us sort of just stick to the same old, flip chart, PowerPoint, but we've always got to think, how can we make our session brain friendly, what we call brain friendly? So that's about, would it be appropriate to use some music? What about artwork? We're all told that we're great artists until we get to the age of about 4, and then we're rubbish. Dance. I use about 24 different colours in terms of the pens that I make available on the table. So it's I use bright coloured paper. I've got lots of post-it notes. I've got index cards. So it's just about how do we think about becoming engaging and doing almost all of the things we used to do when we were live in a training room, as opposed to in our new little virtual training room. And I'm sitting down talking to you now, but I would, if you can and have the space, I would encourage you to stand up, to try to be as engaging in that way, and to use yourself as a resource. One of the issues that we often have is how do we know what people have learned? So that's my biggest argument in favour of having an interactive session, no matter what you're doing, because if you have activities, you can assess as you're going through the session what people have learned, where the gaps are, rather than waiting to the end of the session and doing a test. And then where do you go when you find out some people haven't learned what it is they came to learn? Now, there are some topics, health and safety, various other topics where you probably have to do some kind of formal assessment. But I still think we should challenge ourselves to be as active and interactive as possible. So that's a good way to assess what's been learned. Ending the session is often difficult for people. They sort of get to 5 minutes before the end and they, any questions? But I think we can do a range of things. Set up a peer exercise. If you use something like Zoom, you can put people, pairs into breakout room and give them a couple of topics and challenge them to ask each other what they've learned about that topic. You can encourage the group, if everybody is in agreement, to set up a blog group or a Facebook group, so the learning is ongoing. If you're working with a group from one organisation, and let's hope that work continues to come in for us, you might suggest giving them some virtual index cards and saying, right, what are the 10 key things that you can take away from the session, and let's put them up in our virtual rooms, and when we have our weekly meetings, we can remind ourselves about what the session has taught us. The thing you shouldn't do is go over the time that you said the session was going to end. That's still a cardinal sin. In the same way, if you said you're going to finish at 4 o'clock in real life when we were face to face, you don't go over the time you've set. And then finally, getting feedback about how you have run the session, facilitated. It doesn't matter. I've been training for over 30 years, and there are still things that I need to learn. Sometimes you might get feedback and you think, oh, I'm not sure that's fair or legitimate. I mean, hopefully that won't happen very often, but it's always great to keep learning. So I have a qualitative, quantitative online feedback form that I've always used and that I will continue to use.